The relationship between the United States and China has always been complex, marked by a history of both collaboration and conflict. It's a delicate dance between cooperation and competition, with each side trying to outmaneuver the other while maintaining a semblance of partnership. However, during Donald Trump's presidency, this relationship faced unprecedented challenges that tested the limits of diplomacy and economic policy. Trump's America First agenda put China squarely in the crosshairs, aiming to reduce the trade deficit and bring jobs back to American soil. His administration viewed China not just as an economic rival, but also as a strategic threat to American global dominance. Trump's policies, often characterized by aggressive rhetoric and unilateral actions, created significant friction. Trade disputes erupted, leading to tariffs and counter-tariffs that affected global markets. Military tensions simmered in the Pacific, with both nations showcasing their military might through exercises and strategic posturing. Diplomatic channels struggled to bridge the widening divide, as both sides dug in their heels, making compromise increasingly difficult. This period marked a low point in U.S.-China relations, leaving a legacy of mistrust and uncertainty that would take years to mend. The world watched nervously as these two global powers locked horns, aware that their actions had far-reaching implications. The stakes were high, with the potential for conflict and economic disruption looming large over international affairs. The future of this critical relationship remained uncertain as Trump's presidency ended, leaving many questions unanswered. The question now is, what happens if Trump returns to the White House? Will the tensions escalate, or will there be a path to reconciliation? One of the most disruptive aspects of Trump's China policy was his aggressive trade tactics, which sent shockwaves through the global economy. Trump imposed hefty tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, aiming to reduce the trade deficit and pressure China into changing its trade policies. He argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and industries from unfair Chinese trade practices, which he claimed were harming the U.S. economy. In response, China retaliated with tariffs of its own, targeting key American products like soybeans, automobiles, and other agricultural goods, creating a significant impact on American farmers. This tit-for-tat exchange escalated into a full-blown trade war, with both countries imposing increasingly severe tariffs on each other's goods. The trade war had a tangible impact on both economies, leading to uncertainty and disruptions in global supply chains. American businesses and consumers faced higher prices for goods, while Chinese exporters struggled to find new markets for their products, leading to economic strain. While the tariffs did little to change China's trade practices, they did inflict significant economic pain on both sides, affecting industries and workers. The trade war highlighted the deep economic interdependence between the U.S. and China, demonstrating that decoupling these two economic giants would be a costly and complicated endeavor, with far-reaching consequences for the global economy. Beyond trade, Trump's presidency saw a marked increase in military tensions between the U.S. and China. The South China Sea, a strategically vital waterway, became a focal point of this tension. China has staked territorial claims in the region, building artificial islands and military installations. The U.S., asserting freedom of navigation principles, conducted naval operations and military exercises in the region. These actions were perceived by China as provocative and further fueled mistrust between the two countries. The Trump administration also increased arms sales to Taiwan, a self-governing island that China claims as its own. This move further angered Beijing, which views any support for Taiwan's independence as a direct challenge to its sovereignty. The escalating military activities in the region raised concerns about the potential for miscalculation or accidental conflict. The Trump administration's approach to diplomacy with China was often characterized by confrontation rather than cooperation. High-level dialogues between the two countries became increasingly rare and unproductive. The lack of communication and trust made it difficult to address areas of disagreement and find common ground. Trump's personal style, often confrontational and unpredictable, further complicated diplomatic efforts. His public criticism of China and its leaders strained relations and made it challenging to build a constructive dialogue. The breakdown in diplomatic communication heightened the risk of misunderstanding and miscalculation, making it more difficult to manage the complex challenges in the U.S.-China relationship. Section 5. The Taiwan tightrope, a flashpoint in U.S.-China relations. Taiwan has long been a sensitive issue in U.S.-China relations, often causing friction and diplomatic challenges between the two superpowers. China considers Taiwan a breakaway province that must be reunified with the mainland, by force if necessary. This stance has been a cornerstone of Chinese policy for decades. The U.S., while officially recognizing Beijing's One China policy, has maintained unofficial ties with Taiwan and provided it with military support. This delicate balance is known as strategic ambiguity. During the Trump administration, there was a noticeable shift in U.S. policy towards Taiwan, which marked a significant change in the dynamics of the region. Trump increased arms sales to Taiwan and authorized high-level visits by U.S. officials, much to China's displeasure. These moves were seen as provocative by Beijing. These actions were seen by Beijing as a departure from the long-standing U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity regarding Taiwan, escalating tensions further. The Taiwan issue remains a potential flashpoint in U.S.-China relations, and any perceived shift in U.S. policy towards Taiwan is met with strong condemnation from Beijing. The future of this delicate balance remains uncertain. Section 6. Technological competition, the battle for global dominance. The US and China are locked in a fierce competition for technological supremacy. This competition encompasses a wide range of sectors including artificial intelligence, 5G networks, and quantum computing. The Trump administration viewed China's technological advancements as a threat to US economic and national security. The US took steps to restrict Chinese companies like Huawei from accessing American technology and markets. The Trump administration also accused China of engaging in intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. This technological rivalry is likely to intensify in the coming years, regardless of who occupies the White House. It's a competition with significant implications for the future of the global economy and the balance of power. Section 7. The specter of a second Trump presidency, China's concerns. The prospect of a second Trump presidency is a source of significant anxiety for China. Chinese leaders view Trump as unpredictable, confrontational, and hostile to China's interests. They fear that a second Trump term would usher in a period of even greater tension and confrontation. China is particularly concerned about Trump's willingness to use tariffs and other economic weapons against them. They are also wary of his administration's hawkish stance on Taiwan and the South China Sea. China is likely to approach a second Trump presidency with caution and skepticism, bracing for a continuation of the confrontational policies that defined his first term. Section 8. Economic retaliation, China's potential response to renewed pressure. If Trump returns to power and continues his aggressive policies towards China, Beijing has a range of options for retaliation. China could impose further tariffs on American goods, restrict access to its vast market for U.S. companies, and manipulate its currency to gain a trade advantage. China could also leverage its economic influence over other countries to pressure the U.S. Beijing has been actively forging closer economic ties with nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. China could use these relationships to build alternative supply chains and reduce its dependence on the U.S. China's economic retaliation could have significant consequences for the U.S. economy and global markets. Section 9. A new Cold War? The risk of heightened confrontation. Some analysts fear that a second Trump presidency could lead to a new Cold War between the U.S. and China. This new Cold War would be different from the first, as it would be primarily fought in the economic and technological realms rather than on the battlefield. However, the risk of military conflict should not be discounted. The escalating military activities in the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait raise concerns about the potential for miscalculation or accidental clashes. A new Cold War would have profound consequences for the international order, dividing the world into competing blocs and undermining global cooperation on pressing issues like climate change and pandemics. Section 10. Global ramifications. The impact on international alliances. The U.S.-China rivalry is having a significant impact on international alliances. Countries around the world are being forced to choose sides or navigate a complex web of competing interests. Trump's America First approach and his disdain for multilateral institutions have alienated many U.S. allies. This has created an opportunity for China to expand its influence on the global stage. China has been actively courting countries with trade deals, infrastructure investments, and diplomatic overtures. The future of the international order will depend in part on whether the US can repair its alliances and present a united front against China's growing assertiveness. Section 11. Expert Opinions, Analyzing the Potential Fallout. Experts on US-China relations are divided on what a second Trump presidency would mean for the relationship. Some believe that Trump's unpredictable nature and his willingness to challenge the status quo could actually create opportunities for breakthroughs in certain areas. They argue that China may be more willing to make concessions to avoid a trade war or other confrontations. However, many experts are more pessimistic. They fear that Trump's confrontational approach and his lack of understanding of China's history and culture will only exacerbate tensions and increase the risk of conflict. These experts believe that a second Trump presidency would be highly destabilizing for the US-China relationship and the broader international order. Section 12. Navigating the Future, the Need for Dialogue and Cooperation. Despite the challenges, it's essential for the US and China to find ways to manage their rivalry peacefully and constructively. Dialogue and cooperation are crucial to addressing shared challenges like climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation. Both countries must resist the temptation to view their relationship solely through the lens of zero-sum competition. They need to identify areas of common interest and work together to find mutually beneficial solutions. The future of US-China relations, and indeed the world, depends on the ability of these two global powers to find ways to coexist and cooperate. Section 13. Conclusion. A complex relationship at a crossroads. The US-China relationship is the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world today. It's a relationship fraught with challenges and complexities, but also one of immense importance. The outcome of the 2024 US presidential election will have a significant impact on the future of this critical relationship. A second Trump presidency would likely usher in a period of continued tension and confrontation, while a new administration may offer an opportunity for a reset and a more constructive approach. Regardless of who occupies the White House, it's imperative for the US and China to find ways to manage their rivalry responsibly and prevent it from spiraling into conflict. The stakes are simply too high for anything less.